Work was in full swing at the mansion. Tim, the owner, and Sarah, the nanny, were decorating the room, hanging balloons, setting the table, and celebrating the birthday of their only favorite son, Itan. The baby was turning 6. Only the birthday boy was not particularly happy. He sat motionless in his wheelchair and stared at one point, showing absolutely no interest in what was happening. His father looked at his son now and then with longing and tried to cheer him up somehow. "Itan, my son, look how beautiful it is. Soon Grandma and Grandpa will come. Uncle Peter and Aunt Rose will give you so many presents. What would you like more than anything in the world? I'm ready to fulfill any wish you want, as long as you smile." The boy suddenly became lively. His eyes lit up and he said quietly, "The thing I want most in the world is to see my mom. I miss her so much. I also want my children to be friends with me. And I want my legs to walk. And I don't need anything else." Tim almost cried. He went to the baby, hugged him and said, "Sonny, darling, you know that Mommy is there in heaven. She sees us and loves us. And she gets very sad when you're sad. And you'll definitely stand on your feet soon, I promise you. We'll play ball in the yard like we used to. And the kids? I'll try to think of something." The boy sighed, fell silent and turned away to the window, his eyes fading again. Tim's heart was torn to pieces. It had been a year since that terrible accident, which divided their lives into before and after, and Itan had not come to his senses. And what to do about it? The man did not know. Sometimes his hands were completely down, and everything had been different before. Tim grew up in a wealthy family of businessmen, so from childhood his parents set a high bar for him. He studied at school with a mathematical bias, went to all sorts of developmental circles. The child always had pocket money, expensive phone, and fashionable clothes. But at the same time, Dad was quite strict and did not allow his son to relax in impudence, instilled in him a sense of responsibility. And when Tim began to study at the university and became interested in girls, then his mother began to mentor him. She was a woman with big claims. It was not easy to please her. When she heard about her son's next affair, she immediately made inquiries through acquaintances about the potential daughter-in-law and made her verdict. However, the girl Tim decided to marry and seriously fell in love with, surprisingly liked his parents. She was from a decent professor's family, not walking, not vulgar, quiet and well-mannered. Mom gave the okay, and the son married for love, a classmate of Pam's. The love between them was quiet, deep, and real. When Pam became pregnant, the young ones were so happy, looking forward to their son. Pregnancy was easy and unnoticeable. No toxicosis, no ailments, and the birth was without complications. Itan grew strong, rarely sick, early stood on his feet and went, pleased his parents. Family business passed to Tim from his parents. He owned a small confectionery factory. Their cakes were not cheap, but they were made from natural products and a special recipe, so bought up in a flash they always stood in long lines. Pam was also actively involved in the business. She often went to meetings with culinary masters, learned from their experience, loved to create new masterpieces. She, even being in maternity, did not leave her favorite business. The birth of a child also did not stop her, especially since the son was calm, ate and slept well, and did not cause much trouble to the young mom. Pam often took Itan with her to production when the child grew up. The baby liked to be there very much. He watched with pleasure and interest how cakes and pastries were made, and of course enjoyed them. On that unfortunate day, Pam had to go to work for an hour to see how the process was going. It was an important order, a huge 3-tiered wedding cake, and she couldn't afford to fail. She was an excellent driver. Tim never worried. Pam put the baby in the car seat, buckled him in. The woman always followed the rules. That's what saved the baby's life. Pam's car suddenly skidded on a curve, the road iced over, and she crashed into a pole. For some reason the airbags didn't deploy, and the woman's head smashed into the windshield. The whole front of the car was crushed. Pam was dead before the ambulance arrived, but the baby was unharmed, saved by the child's seat. But he went through a powerful stress because Mom, in fact, died in front of him. After the tragedy, the boy became withdrawn, stopped talking, screamed at night. But the worst thing is that his legs were taken away. Tim was crushed and heartbroken by the grief that fell upon him, his wife's funeral, his longing and hopelessness, and his son's problems. He often closed his eyes and thought, Why, who destroyed his family and why? He was so happy with Pam. Why does heaven take away the people he loves while some scumbag or murderer is alive and well? How unfair is that? Tim wanted to lie on his bed, fall asleep, and never wake up again. Because in this present reality, his beloved Pam was gone. And there never will be. But the problems and the condition of his son did not let him get sad, because he badly needed help and support from his father, and he clenched his fists and continued to live and fight for Ethan's health. For 6 months he drove the child to various clinics, appealed to the best luminaries of medicine. He thought that the problems with his legs were caused by a spinal injury. But all is one, doctors said that physically the child is completely healthy. But the baby's psyche was badly damaged, and that's where all the problems came from. No one knew when the child would get back on his feet, or if he would recover at all, and this was very frightening for the father. Ethan suffered so much other kids gradually stopped socializing with him. He didn't attend daycare. He stayed at home with the nanny 24 hours a day, except for a walk. Tim did not give up, for a year of progress was still, albeit small. The baby talked, stopped screaming at night and afraid of his father's car, but he still couldn't stand on his feet. What only specialists he and his son did not visit, starting from Chinese healers, osteopaths, and ending with folk craftsmen, and all to no avail. Only hands all divorced say, there is no physical cause, only mental trauma. The body so reacted, nothing can be done, and when the reverse process will go, no one knew. Little Ethan, when he longed for his mother, took in his hands a teddy bear which she gave him, and talked to him as if with her. He'd hug it and cry so bitterly, tearfully. He desperately missed her love and affection. He often remembered how she cradled him, how she kissed him, how she whispered that he was the most beloved son in the world, or how they were together on a day off lying on the bed until lunchtime, watching cartoons and eating vanilla ice cream with raspberry jam from a vase. And today, like a birthday, but no mood, my son was sad. Of course, he loved his daddy very much, reached out to him, but after that tragedy the child became completely different, not like before. Tim went to the supermarket to buy more drinks and some other small things for the table, and then he was going to pick up his parents and bring them home to his grandson. There was a big snowstorm outside. The wind was howling and swirling huge streams of snow. You couldn't see a thing. The frost was -20, no less. The man was leaving the store when he noticed a woman with a child in her arms on the porch. She looked to be about 30 years old, not more, poorly dressed but clean, a thin short jacket and a scarf on her head. Her daughter was also dressed obviously out of season, some old fur coat and a cap made of zigika, weak boots. She was shaking from the cold and huddled against her mother. Tim felt so sorry for them, he couldn't stand it. Took out a large bill from his wallet and approached them. "Pardon me, you and the child are completely frozen. Here, take this, buy yourself something to eat, have a snack. At least go indoors and warm yourselves. Why are you traveling in such a blizzard? How will you get back? Buses aren't running much now because of the weather. Half of the flights have been canceled. Utility workers can't cope. They don't have time to clean the roads." The woman looked at him with such gratitude. The little girl was shaking. She was very cold. The stranger said, "Thank you very much, it's so nice. Don't think I'm not a beggar. My name is Natalie, and the girl's name is Mary. We live in the country. We missed the bus. We were warming ourselves in the store until the guard asked us to. I can see from here, as soon as the bus comes, we'll leave." Tim was about to say goodbye, but then suddenly thought, what if we invite them to our son's birthday party? Ethan would play with the girl, he had dreamed of it. At least let the poor people warm up, eat delicacies. You can see that they barely survive from bread to water. The man took another hard look at the woman and said to her decisively, "You know what, Natalie? I'm inviting you and your daughter to my son's birthday party. He's 6 years old. His name is Ethan. I realize it's an unexpected offer because we don't know each other. Consider it a big favor. My son doesn't walk. He's sick. It's a long story. He rarely has kids come to visit him. He gets very upset. And so your girl will play with him, you'll warm up, eat good food, have a rest. And then I'll call you a cab." "All right. The intercom code is 357. The nanny will meet you. I'll call her. I'll call a cab. I just have to go pick up my parents. Don't be so shy. Ethan is a wonderful, kind boy, Everything will be fine." Natalie was happy and gladly accepted the invitation. "Thank you very much, Tim. I can't feel my feet from the cold, as if my daughter would not freeze her feet off. And the bus is still not here. You're just saving us. Don't worry, we won't be long. We'll congratulate your son, warm up and leave." The little girl babbled, "We're going to visit my uncle? Yes? To play with the boy? What are we going to give him?" Natalie jumped up. "It's really awkward to go to the birthday boy without a present. I'll buy him a small car or an album with pencils." The man tried to dissuade her, explaining that Ethan had plenty of these cars, but the woman was adamant and said that she would not go to visit the child empty-handed. In the end, Natalie chose an inexpensive glowing balloon with snowflakes, which when turned upside down fell down so beautifully, spinning to pleasant music. She was pleased with it, and agreed now to go for a visit. Tim sent Natalie and her daughter by cab to his house, not fully understanding how he had decided to do it. He himself went to pick up his parents. Mom, as always, took a long time to get ready, changing her coat twice, fixing her hair, and finally they were on their way. It took them an hour to get through the snowstorm. Tim hadn't said anything to his parents about Natalie. He'd decided to let it be. He knew in advance that his mother wouldn't like the idea of inviting strangers home. She was a woman of pretensions, and she was wary of new people, preferring old and trusted friends. When Tim and his parents came home, the fun was already in full swing. He had hired an animator in advance, and a cheerful clown entertained the guests. The guests liked it very much. Adults with pleasure sang songs with him, solved charades and jokes. After all, for each correct answer there was a prize. But the birthday boy was not interested in the clown at all. The boy enthusiastically played with Mary, the same little girl from the street. They were on the floor, on a huge, soft, snow-white carpet, playing a game of their own, oblivious to everything around them. Natalie sat modestly on the edge of the festive table, clapping her hands and watching the guests participate in the contests. Against the background of the rich and luxuriously dressed friends of the family, of course, she stood out a lot. An old turtleneck and jeans of unknown color. On her head, her hair was pulled back into a simple ponytail. Surprisingly, even in such simple clothes and without a drop of makeup, the woman looked good. She was naturally a pretty blonde with big blue eyes and snow-white as if porcelain skin. But her daughter was the complete opposite of her. Dark, dark skin, like a gypsy, and brown eyes, like coals. Mary was fidgety, laughing, and very sociable. She was always telling Ethan something, and he was engaged in the conversation. His father could not be happy. He had not seen his son so happy for a long time. The parents congratulated their grandson, gave him a huge children's car on the control, and a modern children's encyclopedia with beautiful illustrations. The boy thanked and kissed his grandmother, and he and Mary immediately began to look at the presents. Tim introduced Natalie. "Mommy, Daddy, meet Natalie. This is Natalie. We met by chance today, and I decided to invite her and my daughter to the party. Look how excited Ethan is. He's been looking forward to playing with the kids. In my opinion, spending time with the baby is the best gift for him. He doesn't even look at the clown." Galina Petrovna did not share her son's joy and reprimanded him right in front of the guest. "Tim, how can you do that? It is extremely rash to invite to the guests unfamiliar people of dubious appearance, and if they are con artists. Do not know how our grandson will affect our communication with the street gang. You're so trusting." Natalie felt hurt and embarrassed. She blushed and fidgeted, and wanted to ask to go home. After all, the other guests were also looking at her with a sidelong glance, and no one was talking to her. But Tim immediately pulled his mother away and said angrily, "Mom, I'm not a child anymore, and I have my own life. We all came to your favorite grandson's party, so why spoil it? I repeat, once again, Natalie and Mary are my guests, and I ask that you treat them with the respect they deserve. Do we have a deal? Why don't you try our new specialty meat and cheese pie? The chef worked hard for me. I even ordered your favorite cake. Help yourself." The woman pressed her lips together and stopped badgering Natalie. Her upbringing didn't allow her to make an ugly scandal, and she didn't want to upset her grandson. Still, all evening she looked at the uninvited guest, and if she smiled at her son, she was even a little angry. The wise mother decided that later she would talk seriously with Tim again and find out where he dug up this beggar. It is understandable that the son suffers from loneliness, but this is no reason to drag home all sorts of trash from the street. It got dark quickly, and the guests began to leave. The parents took a cab too. Only Natalie and Mary remained. The woman said timidly, "It's getting late. My daughter and I have to go home too." "Thank you for everything, Tim. It was the first time I've ever been to a party like this. I really enjoyed it. The clown is so funny, wonderfully led the program. You can see that a real professional. No one was bored all evening. And your son is a wonderful, smart boy. I think he and Mary are great friends." Ethan suddenly began to ask his father, "Daddy, please, can Mary spend the night with Mom? We're best friends now. I'm having so much fun. Oh, please, it's my birthday. So I can make any wish I want?" Tim looked at Natalie, embarrassed and confused, and he suggested, "And really, why would you want to drive at night? The blizzard still hasn't calmed down. Stay here. There are 2 cribs in the nursery. Mary and Ethan can sleep in them. I'll make up your room. You won't bother me and my son at all." Natalie smiled and replied, "All right, let's not upset the birthday boy. We'll stay, but on one condition. I'll clean up the place myself, wash the dishes, set up, put everything in order. I've got to do something useful. It's embarrassing to be sheltered, fed, and put to bed just like in a fairy tale." Tim was happy, fussed, made the bed for the guests, prepared clean towels and bathrobes in the bathroom. And he watched how the guest deftly manages the dishes, rubs it to a shine, cleans up. It is obvious that the woman is economic, not lazy. The children played a little more, then Natalie gave them both a bath and put them to bed. The babies fell asleep instantly, without even having to read a story. The adults went to bed too. Tim was so tired during the day that he didn't even notice how soundly he fell asleep. Tomorrow was a day off. He had let the nurse go, and he could get a good night's sleep at least once a week. Tim woke up not early enough to hear the radio call from the nursery. It meant that Ethan was awake too, and he needed help. The man remembered about last night's guests and jumped up. But there was no one in the house. Natalie and Mary had left. There was a note on the kitchen table. "Thank you for the party. Mary and I enjoyed it very much." The landlord was even a little upset, and the son was sad again. But nothing to be done. People have their own lives. The week flew by with work and chores. Every evening Tim saw the same picture. Ethan was texting someone on the phone. He was so enthusiastic, often smiling, receiving smiley faces and pictures. The surprised father asked more than once, "Son, have you made friends? Who do you correspond with?" But the child immediately hid the phone and mysteriously answered, "Yes, Dad, I now have friends, but it's a secret." And also the kid now often turned over that gift lamp in the form of a ball, turned on the music and thoughtfully watched snowflakes falling beautifully. Suddenly one evening, while father and son were having dinner, Tim saw a story on the crime news on TV. The announcer said, "In one of the bedroom neighborhoods of the capital there was a tragedy. A family of famous businessmen died. The spouses died at the same time at night, after the anniversary. The presumed cause of death, alcohol poisoning. Their 3-year-old daughter Mary disappeared without a trace. The investigation is clarifying all the circumstances of this mysterious and confusing case. The child is looking for the police." The man was taken aback and even dropped the remote control. On the video was the same little girl Mary, who had been the day before at their house. Ethan also shouted, "Daddy, does that girl look like Mary? Is that her? Wow, Mary's on TV." Tim was stunned. "I don't know, son, I hope not." "Hey, you're not talking to Aunt Natalie, are you? Tell Dad the truth. I really need to find her so I can find out what's going on. Maybe she and Mary need help. They left so suddenly we didn't even say goodbye. I didn't even ask for their address. I don't know their phone number." The boy showed his father the correspondence, and from the photos the man realized in which village the fugitives were hiding. In one of the photos sent to Ethan, little Mary stood next to a huge snow globe that she and her mom had molded, and on the corner of the house there was a sign that read, 5 Milk Street. He quickly found on the internet which nearby village had such a street and house, and decided to visit there, to talk, to find out from the woman why she had stolen someone else's child. Tim left his son with the nanny and set off. The roads were snowed over. He could barely make it. He found the right house easily on the outskirts of a small village, but it was impossible to get directly to it because of snowdrifts even in an SUV, so I had to leave the car at the beginning of the street and walk. It was not very well maintained. The windows were old wooden. The fence was weak, but in general the house was good and spacious. You could see that a careful owner had once lived here. The path was cleared, and there was a thin trickle of smoke from the chimney. So the owners were at home. The man knocked. A dog barked loudly in the yard, and a shadow flashed outside the window. But no one opened the door for a long time. Tim knocked again. He was not going to give up and leave with nothing. If it didn't open, there was something to be afraid of. Finally, a frightened Natalie appeared on the doorstep, looking around as if she was afraid of someone, and gestured for Tim to come in. It was warm in the house. Mary was playing with a doll on the cot. She saw the visitor and smiled, waved, obviously recognizing him. Natalie asked confusedly, "How did you find us? Did Ethan tell you?" "Oh, I shouldn't have texted him. I wanted to support the little boy so that he wouldn't feel lonely, and here I was. I caused trouble." Tim didn't try to be coy and asked me point blank, "Natalie, why did you steal someone else's baby? I know everything. All the channels are talking about the deaths of businessmen. They showed Mary in close-up. They're looking for her. Tell me the truth, please. Maybe I can help you. You won't be able to hide here for long anyway. One of the neighbors will recognize the baby and call the police." The woman cried, her hands shaking. She wailed, "Come on, not here. Let's go to the kitchen so Mary won't hear." Sitting down at the table, the woman began, "Mary is not a stranger's child. She's my daughter. I gave birth to her 3 years ago." Tim didn't believe it. "You're lying. Mary doesn't look like you at all. The type is different. If you don't tell me the truth, I'll call the police myself. What do you want with that girl? What are you planning to do with her? Confess." Natalie grabbed his hands, almost screaming, "Don't call the police, I beg you. They'll put her in an orphanage. I'll tell you everything. I'll start from childhood so you'll understand. This is my home. I was born and raised here. My mom was a cattle rancher all her life. But my dad is a hero. He was in the hot spots. In Afghanistan and Chechnya, he had many awards. Our dog Mukhtar, who lives in the yard, is his faithful friend from the front. He saved him once very small. The puppy wanted to put to sleep. He is not a purebred German, but a litter. But his father took pity and did not allow it, took it for himself, and began to train him himself, to teach him commands. He took him to cinematologists. And you know, from Mukhtar, such a great smart search dog turned out, better than any purebreds. Our dog found people under rubble and rescued them. My dad has been gone for how many years, but Mukhtar still serves us faithfully and faithfully. He is so smart, knows all the commands, kind. But he's old now. He's almost blind. When my dad died, I was just finishing school. It was a terrible blow for me and my mom, a great grief. Without him, the house immediately orphaned, and financially became very tight. My mother's one salary was not enough to live on. After school, I went to the capital to earn money. There was no normal work in the village. Although my mother was against it, she always thought that in the big city only shame and debauchery. She was old school. She even dreamed of marrying me off to the son of the local tractor driver, Jack. But he was so stubborn, stupid, ugly, and I snorted and ran away. And my mother was very upset with me. I got a job as a housekeeper for the family, also by patronage. A woman from our village brought me to a recruitment agency. She herself worked as a cook in some rich family. She helped me find a job my mom asked her to. People were not bad, not scandalous, paid well and well. I was also not lazy, tried. In general, I was very happy with the work. A few years flew by unnoticed. A couple of times a month I went to my mom's house, helped her. I missed her very much. And then the grief came to our family again. From where and did not expect, my mom got very sick. I long ago began to notice that she was thin, slept a lot, sold the household. It was unbearable to look after it. But we wrote it all off to chronic fatigue. I brought her all imported vitamins, but they did not help. Then I couldn't stand it and took her to a doctor in the capital. That's where it all came to light. We needed a lot of money for treatment and surgery. My mother was completely down. She realized that we would never be able to raise that kind of money. and I promised her that I would find the money and save her life. This thought did not give me rest. I was thinking day and night about how I could save my nearest and dearest person. I was not myself crying. Of course the owners noticed. Tiffany, the owner's wife, found out what I was in trouble, and I begged them to lend me money because no one would give me a loan. The couple thought about it, and then offered me to become a surrogate mother. They could not conceive a child for many years. The wife has problems. At first I couldn't accept the idea that I would have to give the baby away. I mean, it's kind of wild. Okay, if I already had children, maybe it would be easier, but so to give birth and give the baby, it is not in my head. But my mom was getting worse, so I said yes. I had no choice. Lucky I got pregnant right away. The wife of the owner was wearing a belly pad, supposedly on the register. The doctor was bribed, and I did not appear anywhere in public throughout the pregnancy, so that no one guessed anything. I also gave birth at home. The businessman arranged everything. As soon as I gave birth, they took my baby away from me. They didn't even let me feed her. And I was so sick I could go to the noose. You can't imagine what it means to carry a baby inside you, to feel it, to give birth, and then to give it away. How difficult and painful it is. I was paid properly, without deceit, and of course dismissed from sin, taking a receipt that I will never and under any circumstances will not look for a child and interfere in the lives of spouses. And the girl was registered to them as if Tiffany had given birth to her that night. So I'm officially Mary's nobody. I came back to the village as if I'd been gutted like a fish and thrown ashore. But I tried to cheer up. There was no time to get discouraged. I had one more fight ahead of me, for the life of my mom. Money was enough for all the treatment, more than enough. My mom was put in the hospital. We fought for a year. Surgery was done. It seemed to improve. But no, the body could not cope with another chemotherapy, and she died in my arms. I confessed to my mother just before her death, where I got such money from. I could no longer carry such a burden on my heart. She cried for a long time and said, "It's a sin, my daughter, a great sin. A child should be with its mother, and the mother is the one who gave birth to it. My poor girl, you broke your life because of me. And all for nothing." These her last words did not go from my head, all mixed up in my soul. The pain of loss from the death of my mother, loneliness, longing, and a frantic desire to see his tiny. I was like a wound-up mechanism, got up like a robot, went to the farmer's canteen. I worked there as a cook, and in the evening gave vent to my feelings, howled and roared until midnight. And so almost all the time. I suffered a lot. I couldn't sleep. I dreamt about labor and my baby. I kept thinking, how is she? How did she turn out? How is she doing? And a week ago I couldn't stand it. I decided to go to the house. I thought I would fall on my knees and beg to see my daughter at least for a minute. Just one eye to see her. I waited for a long time at the apartment. No one opened, and then the door suddenly gave in. It was unlocked. I went in as if in a delirium. My heart sensed trouble. I saw the spouses in bed, dead, turning blue, and my daughter in the closet sitting and crying, apparently frightened very much. I couldn't remember myself. I grabbed her and ran out of there. I didn't even dress her up. I wrapped her up in a warm plaid which was lying on the chair there and rushed to the station. And there I took a cab and went home to the village. At home I found some of my old childhood things and started to live here. Surprisingly, but Mary went to me either from shock or from stress. She did not cry at all. She does not know and does not understand yet that Mom and Dad are no more. All asks when they will come back. She calls me Aunt Natalie, so I had to lie about being my mom's friend. I know I did a terrible thing. I should have called the police and not stolen Mary. That's true. But then I would have been charged with murder and my daughter would have been put in an orphanage. Isn't that better? I don't know what to do next. I'm so confused. But I know one thing. I won't give Mary to anyone, even if I have to die. I carried her in my heart. She's my daughter and that businessman's daughter. They couldn't get eggs from his wife. Tim clutched his head and wailed, "What a mess you've made of things, Natalie. Humanly speaking, of course, you can be understood, but you're in a very complicated and delicate situation. The police are unlikely to look into it. You're the last person to see the deceased couple. Your fingerprints have probably been found there, and no matter how you look at it, Mary's papers say she's their daughter, and you stole her. And how to prove otherwise is a big question. And you also had a motive for murder, and what a motive. It's a stalemate. You have to think hard. But no sooner had he finished than someone smashed the window with a rock and 2 thugs burst into the house. Natalie didn't understand at first and started shouting, "Did you bring the police? Yes? I'm not giving Mary back. Sweetheart, come here, come to me, come to me, come to my arms." The girl was frightened, and without speaking she climbed into Natalie's arms and hugged her tightly. One of the bandits yelled, "There she is, the snotty heiress. Bring her here, we don't want her alive, and the woman can be wasted so she knows how to spoil everything for us." They tried to take the little girl away, but Tim stood up for them. The bandits shouted, "Who the hell is this? Where'd you come from, smartass? You better not get involved in this story, or you'll be in trouble." But the man could not leave a woman with a child in such a critical situation and threw his fists at the bandits, remembering his karate and wrestling lessons in childhood. A scuffle ensued. The man fought like a lion. He was not a timid man. Natalie took a moment to run out into the yard with the girl and untie the dog, shouting, "Mukhtar, Fas, save the mistress." The dog did not hesitate. He was tearing off the chain like a madman, flew into the house and began to furiously bite the offenders and tear them to pieces. One of the bandits took out a knife and began to swing it, wounded Tim and yelled, "Shut up already, don't bother us. Where did you come from? Protector. Alex, put that rabid dog away. He bit my leg. Beat him up." Neighbors raised a ruckus, called the district police, and 3 strong men with pitchforks also got into a fight. Because in the village there is no stranger's misfortune. Everyone rushes to help. Soon the district police officer arrived in a station wagon. All the participants of the fight were taken to the police station, including Natalie. Tim was taken to the hospital, and Mary was taken to the orphanage until all the circumstances were clarified. The girl was crying. She was barely torn away from Natalie. She was hugging her neck and screaming, "Aunt Natalie, don't leave me, I'm scared." The woman was sobbing too because she thought she was saying goodbye to her daughter forever. Now she would never get out of prison. They would hang all the dogs on her. She whispered to her, not remembering herself, "Mary, know that Mommy loves you very much and will never forget you. You are the most beloved and dear girl in the world." Tim was taken to the hospital in a serious condition. He only had time, while he was conscious, to call the nurse. "Sarah, my affairs are bad. I am wounded. I am taken to the 3rd City Hospital. Be with Ethan at all times, please. I have no one else to overeat." The woman shrieked and began to rush around the house, gathering the things of the owner, necessary for him in the hospital and documents to look for, the policy and passport. She sobbed. Ethan became alarmed, because his father had been gone for a long time, and asked, "Nanny, tell me, what happened? Was it Daddy who called? Why is he gone so long? I'm afraid. Are you going somewhere? Don't leave me alone." The woman pulled the boy close to her, kissed him on the top of his head and began to talk. "Itan, don't worry. Daddy is sick. They put him in the hospital. You and I will call a cab and go to see him. I have to concentrate so I don't forget anything. Do you want me to take you to your grandmother's? And you can stay with them for a while? Why do you really need to go to the hospital?" The boy stubbornly shook his head. "No, first to my dad. I want to see him. Nanny, Daddy's not going to die, is he? I'm so scared." Sarah again began to calm the little one, although she herself had a troubled heart. "What are you saying, Ethan? Of course he will not die. The doctors will treat him and let him go home. Now we cannot with you to get sad. We need to support your daddy." The boy was so worried about his father, all the way he nervously twisted the button on his jacket, almost ripped it off. More than anything else in the world, little Ethan was afraid of losing his father, because after the death of his mother, he was everything to him, the closest and most dear person. Sarah and the boy waited for a long time in the hospital corridor. Finally, the doctor came out to them and said, "Don't worry, everything's fine. The wound is sewn up. There is no danger to life. Well, fighter, cheer up. Your daddy will get better soon. Don't cry." The boy asked quietly, "Can I see him? Please. I want to see my daddy." And the little boy cried again, unable to cope with his emotions. The doctor's heart trembled. He had a daughter growing up, so he allowed it. "Okay, as an exception, come into the room for a while." Sarah brought the child in a stroller into the room. Tim was lying on the bed, pale and confused, his arm and shoulder bandaged. Ethan, seeing this, suddenly jumped up from the wheelchair and himself, his legs staggered to his father, threw himself into his arms and cried again, "Daddy! "Daddy, I was so scared. Don't go away for so long. Don't leave me. I'm scared." And the dumbfounded Tim could not believe it and wailed, "Son, Jesus, you finally got up from that damn chair? I don't believe it. Come on, sweetie. Walk some more. Make your daddy happy. It'll make me feel better. I can't believe we waited for this." Itan only now realized that he could walk like before. The boy hesitantly got out of bed and walked around the room, at first slowly, small steps, and then faster and faster. He rejoiced and shouted, "Daddy, I walk like before. I can now run with the children and play ball." Sarah also baptized and cried. She knew how worried the owner was about his son's illness, how much effort and patience he invested to make him become the same again. She wailed, "Lord, our prayers have reached you. Itan is walking on his feet. What a joy." Tim slowly recovered, and his son visited him every day with his nanny. But the parents had a difficult conversation. When they heard from the nanny about what had happened, they immediately rushed to the hospital. Mom kissed her son and wailed, "God, Tim, how could you do this? We don't have enemies in our company, and it's not the 90s now. But did the competitors come to such a low point? A stabbing? I hope you reported it to the police?" Tim replied, "My work had nothing to do with it. I'll tell you all about it, but I don't think you'll like it." When Louise found out how and because of whom her son was hurt, she became indignant. "And I told you, I warned you, these street acquaintances do not end well. Why do you need someone else's problems, you tell me? If Natalie was taken to the police, it must have been for something. Maybe she killed those businessmen. Stay out of this, you're in enough trouble as it is." But then Tim couldn't take it anymore. "Mom, how can you say that? You taught me from childhood that I should help people when they're in trouble. I believe Natalie, and I'm going to help her, okay? Whether you like it or not. You don't know her at all, and you're jumping to conclusions and accusing her of murder. What if you couldn't see me for years? Wouldn't you go to any lengths to find out how I live, what's wrong with me? As a woman, you have to understand her. Yes, Natalie has done things, but it's only because she misses her own daughter, longs for her. I can't imagine what would happen to me if Itan wasn't around. Children are the meaning of our lives, and we're all capable of doing anything crazy for them." His father stepped in and supported him. "I'm on your side, son, and I'm proud of you. You were not afraid of the thugs and protected a woman with a child. That's worthy of respect. I can tell by the way you're talking, you like this Natalie, don't you? You wouldn't defend her so zealously if you didn't care about her. Listen to yourself and do what you know. Get well soon. We were afraid for you." Tim thanked his father for his words of support. It was very important for him now, and reassured his mother that the worst was over, and the police would deal with everything properly and punish those responsible. And he would definitely not be in danger anymore. Louise hugged her son goodbye, and even more in her heart hated this beggar, inexplicably from where fell on his son's head, only trouble from her. One thing was happy, the grandson got back on his feet. The man decided to help poor Natalie out of the trap she had fallen into by her own stupidity. But it was impossible to do it himself, so he decided to hire a good lawyer to defend the interests of the woman in court. After all, so far everything was against her, the theft of the child, the concealment of the crime, and maybe even complicity in it. The two thugs who had attacked them refused and kept silent, not going to cooperate with the investigation. It was only known that one of them was a cousin of the deceased businessman, a certain Carl, and the second, his accomplice, a previously convicted citizen, Ron. Tim didn't skimp and hired the best lawyer in town, Mike. On his account were hundreds of successfully completed difficult cases. He was the one who pieced together all the information. To prove Natalie and Mary were related, they had a genetic test, and it showed that they were indeed mother and daughter. And that was half the battle. Mike, with amazing meticulousness, interviewed all the participants of that ill-fated banquet, after which the businessman died, and restored the chain of events by the minute. Many remembered that it was Carl who brought the cognac, and it was drunk by the deceased spouses. Other guests preferred wine or champagne. The lawyer insisted on a search of Carl's house. They turned everything over and found a clue, a drug that in large doses causes paralysis of the respiratory system. Finding a trace, Mike insisted on a second autopsy, attracted his experts, and they found in the body of the remains of the same substance. It turned out that the cousin bad brother decided to kill the whole family, and thus get rich. But the little girl was in the way. Immediately he did not decide to get rid of her, he thought, after the death of the spouses, to formalize the guardianship of the girl, and then to complete what he had started. But everything went wrong. The girl disappeared. Having such facts in hand, the investigation pressed on Carl, and he realized that now he cannot get away, confessed everything. Our father and Oliver, though Oliver's fathers were siblings, but between them there was a gulf. One became a rich man, and my father remained a pauper. Such an injustice. I've hated Oliver in my heart since I was a kid. I envied him. Oliver had a prestigious university and a business on a silver platter from his father. Live and enjoy, and he got a beautiful wife. They gave birth to an heiress in their old age, and now it's lucky. But I did not ask him to join his company, but he would not let me, saying that working with relatives is the worst thing in the world. You can't think of anything worse, you won't have any trouble. He taught me everything about life, and I didn't need his advice for ages. I didn't want to work as a simple manager all my life, it's not fair. And then I lost a lot in cards. They promised to put me on the belt if I didn't pay back my debt. So I figured out how to solve all my problems in one fell swoop. And everything would have worked out, if not for that foolish fool who stole the girl from under my nose, and not her protector. Where did they come from? The investigator was amazed at the cruelty of Carl, to kill his brother and his wife with his own hands and not repent. He asked, "How did you find Natalie? How did you get her address?" Carl chuckled. "It's a military secret. My partner in crime was watching the apartment, waiting for the moment to call the police. So he remembered the little girl well and followed her. And then we decided to take the girl. I don't know why that woman would want her. So we broke into the house, but we didn't know she wasn't alone. That hustler had parked his car a little farther away. So our plan failed. Damn them, that man and that woman, they ruined the combination for me." The investigator was amazed at the cynicism and cruelty of this scoundrel. He asked, "Don't you feel sorry for your brother and his wife, whom you killed? And you made plans for the child. Was it all for money?" Carl grinned. "Do you understand much? If it weren't for that chicken, I'd be rich in a year, and I don't care what the cost." The investigator shook his head. "Who am I talking to about conscience? Well, nothing. In the zone you'll be brought up quickly. You'll repent every day. That's where you'll go." When Natalie was finally released, Tim met her at the prison gate. The woman looked lost and gaunt. She was so happy when she saw her savior and rushed over to him. "Thank you for coming. I'm in a kind of trance. I've seen so much there. You can't even imagine how scary it is there. I was completely desperate. At first the investigator pressured me to confess to the murder, but I decided, anyway, I cannot get out of here, let me rot. But I will not take someone else's sin on myself. I just wouldn't let it go. I also miss my daughter very much. How's she doing at the orphanage, poor thing? It's such a shock for a child. First her parents died, then she got used to me a little, and then they put her in the orphanage. Why did the poor girl have to go through such misfortunes? How can I even explain to her that I'm her birth mom? What if she's adopted by strangers? Then I'll never find her again." Natalie sobbed, and Tim soothed her as best he could, stroking her thin shoulders. "Come on, everything will be all right now. You've already been released. They don't suspect you of anything. There is a genetic expertise that Mary is your own daughter. Now it remains to legalize your rights as a mother and prove that nevertheless the sole and legitimate heiress of the businessman. You know what? Let's go to my house. Ethan will be so happy. You'll rest, recover a little, and then we'll go to Mary's orphanage and visit the girl. You have nothing to do alone in this village and with broken windows. Oh, and, let's use your first name. After all we've been through together, it's strange to shout at each other." The woman suddenly perked up. "Tim, I forgot to say the most important thing. Thank you so much, human, that saved us then with my daughter. If it wasn't for you, they would have definitely taken Mary, and I was killed probably. I got you involved in a story. I was living a good life, and suddenly you came on my head with your problems." The man smiled. "Nothing in life is done for nothing. If it weren't for your problems and my injury, Ethan wouldn't have gotten back on his feet. He's walking on his own now. We finally got rid of that hated wheelchair. My son was so worried about me that he walked on his own, getting out of the wheelchair. Can you imagine? It's such a blessing for me. I really like you, Natalie, both as a person and in general. I never looked at women after my wife died. I thought I'd never be able to fall out of love with Pam, but I look at you and admire you." They drove to Tim's mansion. Mukhtar, happily wagging his tail, immediately rushed to his mistress, began to lick her and bark loudly. The woman cried, kissed his wet nose and wailed, "Mukhtar, my dear Mukhtar, how are you here? Alive. Thank God. How glad I am to see you. Thank you, Tim, for taking the dog in. I never thought I'd see him alive. I was afraid to ask. He's been faithfully serving us for so many years. He saved my daddy in the war, and now he's rushed to defend me with his chest." The man replied cheerfully, "How could I let such a nice faithful dog die? He, like me, was wounded, but the doctors saved Mukhtar, patched him up. I told him to take him home. What would he do there alone in the village? Don't worry, he's fine here. The enclosure is spacious, warm. I feed him like in a sanatorium. We've become very good friends. Itan does not leave him at all." Itan was very happy to have a guest. Now he was running and jumping, gibbering as he could. And he kept asking about Mary. "Where is she? When is she coming?" Tears came to Natalie's eyes again, and she answered, "Soon I will take Mary from the orphanage, and I will never give her to anyone else." Natalie enjoyed a hot shower, ate dinner, played with Itan, and went to bed. It was late. At night she had the same sticky nightmare that had haunted her regularly for 3 years. She's pushing, screaming. It hurts so bad. And then such relief, like an emptiness inside, a baby's cry. She raises her head, hoping to see her baby. She wants to hold her, but the baby is immediately taken away somewhere. Her breasts are bursting with milk, and her eyes are swollen with tears. And Natalie screams, "No, no, no, baby!" Tim heard the screaming from his bedroom, and he was scared, in case something had happened or he needed help. He quietly entered the guest room. Natalie was thrashing around the bed as if in a fever, her hair stuck to her forehead. She was screaming her daughter's name and sobbing. The man started to wake her up, waking her up and whispering, "Natalie, wake up. You're delirious. Come on. It's just a bad dream." The woman finally opened her eyes and looked around frightened. She was embarrassed that she had disturbed her master, and that he could see her half naked in a thin nightgown. And Tim was looking at Natalie, in the same nightgown with the embroidered cornflowers he had once given Pam. She'd never gotten to wear it. The blood boiled in his veins, and suddenly he clasped her tenderly, like a child, and kissed her gently, first on the neck, then on the lips, whispering, "How beautiful you are now. How dear. You drive me crazy. Please, don't ever leave this house again. I don't want that. Don't cry, sweetheart. We will definitely take Mary away, and we will live together. One big and friendly family." Natalie's heart was ready to jump out. She didn't resist, and answered Tim's confession with a kiss. After all, there had never been love in her miserable life. Not counting one poor village beau, and then everything was so twisted, moving to the capital, childbirth, illness and death of his mother. Not to love was. The woman melted and melted from tender confessions, ardent words, and could not believe her happiness. The next day Natalie and Tim went to the orphanage to visit Mary. The woman in charge was stubborn at first and did not want to let them in. She said they were strangers. They were not supposed to. But when she saw the results of the genetic examination, she changed her tone, and she was penetrated and brought the girl. The poor little girl lost even more weight and looked even worse. When she saw Natalie, she immediately rushed to her, climbed into her arms, hugged her around the neck and cried, "Aunt Natalie, have you come for me? Take me away from here. It's bad here. The girls hurt me. They fight and take away my toys." The child was crying bitterly, and the woman's heart was torn to pieces. She kissed her cheeks, wiped her eyes, peeled her sweet tangerine and whispered, "I'll take you. I promise. I won't leave you here. My little girl. My poor little girl." Mary kept babbling, looking into her eyes. "Aunt Natalie, where are my mommy and daddy? Why don't they take me away? I want to go home. Don't they love me anymore?" The woman's heart ached. She wanted to shout, "I'm your mom." But Tim stopped her with a look and quietly began to tell the girl, "Well, Mary, Daddy and Mommy love you very much. How could they not love such a wonderful girl? But as it happens, they are far away now and they can't come back. And Natalie and I love you very much, and Itan misses you so much. We will take you to our house for now. You will play and walk with Itan again, like you did at his birthday party, remember? Will you come to live with us?" The little girl nodded and clung trustingly to Natalie, who took her to the children to distract her from the conversation with the superintendent. And Tim tried to persuade her. "You can see for yourself how the girl is drawn to us, how bad it is for her here. She's a home child. Let her stay at our house for a while, under my responsibility. I'm a businessman with a good reputation. You must have eaten our cakes, Delight, and Kavkaz. I'll have a lawyer draw up the paperwork tomorrow, and he'll get Natalie recognized as the mother and Mary as the heiress. She's his daughter. What's Mary doing here waiting for us?" The superintendent decided to meet Tim's wishes and allowed Mary to stay at his house for the time being. The joyful man entered the playroom and picked Mary up in his arms. "Well, doll, I've made a deal. We're taking you out of here right now. Are you ready?" The girl joyfully clapped her hands and shouted, "Hooray! I'm going to Natalie's, and I'm not going to eat any more nasty stewed cabbage. It's so bad." Itan was very happy that his girlfriend now lived with them, because it was more fun to do everything together, to play, to eat, and to race. Natalie quickly got used to looking after the two boys at once. Itan, after his mother's death, lacked a woman's warmth, attention, and affection, and he was drawn to Natalie. Tim had already forgotten how great it is when you are at home waiting for your favorite woman, children, a covered table, and a hearty dinner. He could not be happy, and tried to take care of his now large family. The lawyer knew his business, and after a month of nervousness and going through the courts and instances Natalie became, and on the documents of the mother for Mary, the girl was recognized officially heiress, and now she owned all the assets and all the movable and immovable property of the deceased spouses. But since the girl was still very young, Natalie could dispose of it all as her own mother. So from a beggar she became a rich woman in an instant. Now Tim's mother didn't look down on her. On the contrary, her parents welcomed her daughter-in-law, took care of their granddaughter, and often came to visit their son. Natalie was almost happy, except for one thing. She agonized and did not know how to tell the truth to the girl. That the mom she lived with was not a mom at all, and her dad was dead, and the real mom was herself. Is it even possible to explain such a thing to a 3-year-old child? The woman decided to consult with Tim. They thought about it for a long time, and then he said, "Honey, I understand how you can't wait for Mary to call you Mom, how important it is to you. But she's too young to understand and accept such hard news about her parents. What if she shuts down? Do you remember what Itan had from the stress? Children are very vulnerable. Their psyche isn't ready for this. Don't traumatize the child, please. Just love her with all your heart, and in time you will become a mom to her anyway. Time heals. It erases all the bad things from the memory. Your daughter will grow up, she'll go to school, then we'll tell you everything. Be patient, my dear. Everything will be fine. Everything will work out." Natalie hugged her beloved and agreed. "You're so wise, I'm lucky. You're right. It's better not to disturb my daughter. Let's just live, love our children, and there be what will be." Time passed, the years flew by, and now Itan in the 3rd grade leads his sister Mary, a cheerful, mischievous 1st grader, by the hand. Natalie waves to them, sends them a kiss, and Mary shouts to her, "Bye, Mom. Is Daddy bringing a cake home from work today? My favorite, with strawberry buttercream? Okay, we're off." Natalie looked at her favorite fidgety child, at the grown-up Itan, and felt so warm and good. How much she loved her babies. Mary had long ago called her mom herself. She no longer asked about her parents, and everyone was happy. Now Natalie was not a beggar, but the spouse of a businessman, looked very expensive and well-groomed. She found her vocation, helped her husband in production. She literally idolized her husband and thanked the heavens that they had pushed them together, because it was Tim, like a good wizard, who had turned her miserable life into a fairy tale.